Hello, this is Heather Hoffman, and today I'm going to show you a fun technique for painting with alcohol inks. I've already stamped my image from Friendship Blooms. It's the Gina K stamp set with Unity, and I stamped it on StazOn ink on Yupo paper. I'm using a little cup of isopropyl rubbing alcohol to clean my brushes between colors, and I have a little palette that I'm just dotting out a little bit of my alcohol ink colors. For this I've used Limeade and Bottle are the two greens that I'm using, and then I'm using Watermelon and Flamingo, and towards the end I'm going to pull out some Pool that I'm going to use on the background. Now, I tested a few different ways with the StazOn ink. Heat setting didn't seem to make a difference, and it stays fairly well, but the color does run a little bit. But because this sort of has a watercolor effect to it, it ends up working and looking okay. But I definitely wouldn't recommend rubbing over your stamped image too much, or kind of, because it will smudge the ink a little bit. So just be really gentle with your color. I pretty much came in with my alcohol ink and just kind of dropped the color in and let it spread a little bit, which is kind of what it wants to do on the alcohol ink anyway. And that little bit of smudgy effect, just to me, it kind of added to the watercolor look. These are also Tim Holtz, they're alcohol ink tools, these brushes, so they came in the set that's kind of designed to work with the alcohol ink. So I started off with my lighter color on the flowers, and then I just dropped a little bit of darker color kind of around and let them sort of blend together on their own, which worked really well. I did one of the flowers, and then I wanted to pop out and do one of the leaves as well, so I went ahead and did the leaves. Some of the color does bleed outside the lines a little bit, but again, the effect of this, I actually expected it to bleed out of the lines quite a bit more than it actually did, so I was pleasantly surprised by how little it did bleed out. I also put some blending solution in one of my little wells there, and I'm especially going to use that as I go around with the soft blue that I'm going to kind of outline my image with. Again, just be really, really gentle as you put the color in. And I also left my stamped image, I stamped it with the StazOn ink using my Misty, and I left that stamp lined up in my Misty. So at the end, you'll see that I'm able to pop back in and re-stamp over the top, and it just kind of clears up that image a little bit and helps pop it in. But I was really excited with just kind of how fun this technique worked, and I want to try it with some different kinds of paper. I even thought about heat embossing it on the Yupo to start with and kind of see what that did, but again, I didn't mind a little bit of ink bleeding just because I think it kind of added to that loose watercolor effect. And about this point is where I grabbed that Pool alcohol ink color. I was trying to pick which, I knew I wanted to come in with a blue, but I was trying to decide which blue I wanted to use. And what I did is I cleaned my brush off a little. You know, it's the alcohol blending solution. My brush that I was using for this obviously wasn't completely clean. So what I did is I brushed around a little of that blending solution and then just dabbed in the color from that Pool. And then I was able just to kind of come out and soften and blend it out. Again, very, very similar to doing like a watercolor wash around the outside edges, and just kind of a different effect with the alcohol. You get a little bit of a bolder look. It's really hard to photograph, so I know my photos don't really do it justice, but it was just kind of a fun, different technique and a different way to play with my alcohol inks than anything I'd really played with before. I definitely want to play with this technique a little more and try some different ways of doing it, but this definitely came out very fun. And the other fun thing is you'll notice that the alcohol inks dry really quickly, and when you dab them back in, they react a little bit different. So as I'd already kind of finished this, I was able to dot a little more color in, and it blends in a completely different way, and every time you do it, it reacts different and you get different texture. Okay, and at this point I'm going to come back in and restamp that image like I was mentioning using my Misty. One of the great things about using the Misty is I could leave my image still lined up exactly where I stamped it, and I know it'll stamp perfectly in the exact same spot. I'm stamping again also with the StazOn ink. I've definitely found that one is the most permanent over the top of alcohol ink. It doesn't, once it dries, it doesn't smudge and rub, but see how you can see that image nice and crisp and clear on there. And I also used the StazOn ink to go ahead and stamp my sentiment underneath, and then I just trimmed it down to fit a card base. Thanks so much for coming by today. Have a wonderful day.